You ever notice how the moment you try to be confident, it backfires? You stand a little straighter. You speak a little louder. You tell yourself, just act confident. And instantly, something feels wrong. Not nervous, not scared, just fake. Like you're watching yourself perform instead of actually being yourself. And the worst part? Other people probably can't even tell, but you can. There's this quiet voice in the back of your head that says, "Who are you trying to be right now?" So you pull back. You soften your voice. You retreat to the version of yourself that feels familiar, even if it's smaller. And here's the question no one ever asks. What if that fake feeling isn't proof that you can't be confident, but proof that the confidence you're trying to use doesn't belong to you? Because if confidence were just about posture, volume, or boldness, you wouldn't feel this inner resistance every time you tried. Something inside you knows when you're putting on a version of yourself that doesn't fit. And once you understand why that happens, you stop forcing confidence and start building the kind that doesn't collapse the moment you become aware of it. So if you've ever felt that strange tension when you try to be confident, don't dismiss it. That feeling is the doorway. Because confidence doesn't usually fail loudly. It fails quietly, in the moments where you start acting instead of responding. And that brings us to the part everyone recognizes, but almost no one talks about. The fake confidence moment. It usually starts small. You're about to speak up. You already know what you want to say. But instead of just saying it, you adjust first. You change your tone. You pick different words. You add firmness where it doesn't naturally belong. And suddenly, you're not expressing a thought. You're presenting one. You can feel it in your body before you can explain it in words. Your movements feel deliberate. Your voice sounds slightly unfamiliar to your own ears, like you're imitating someone who knows what they're doing. You're not anxious. That's the confusing part. You're alert, controlled, self-aware to an uncomfortable degree. It's like part of you steps forward to perform, and another part steps back to watch. And the watching part is brutal. It notices the pauses you wouldn't normally make. It notices how your confidence has a rhythm that doesn't quite match you. It notices that you're trying to be convincing instead of just being clear. That's when the thought hits. This isn't me. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, unsettling way. So you start pulling back mid-sentence. You soften your stance. You undo the confidence you just put on. Not because you were rejected, but because you rejected the version of yourself that showed up. And here's the part no one warns you about. The more you practice this kind of confidence, the more disconnected you feel afterward. Because every time you force yourself into a posture, tone, or presence that doesn't match your internal state, you reinforce the idea that who you naturally are isn't enough. So confidence becomes something you borrow, not something you own. And that's why it feels fragile. That's why it collapses the moment you become aware of it. That's why it drains you instead of energizing you. You're not failing at confidence. You're sensing a misalignment, and your system is trying to tell you something before you ignore it long enough to forget what real confidence feels like. So when that fake feeling shows up, it's easy to assume something's wrong with you, that you're not confident enough yet, that you need more practice, more repetition, more forcing. But what if the problem isn't your confidence? What if it's the role you're stepping into when you try to use it? Because the moment confidence starts feeling like something you put on instead of something you stand in, you're no longer dealing with confidence at all. You're dealing with a mask. And once you see that, everything about why confidence feels fake suddenly starts to make sense. The mask problem. Carl Jung had a very specific name for what's happening here. He called it the persona. Not a personality. Not your identity. A mask. Jung described it like this. The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself, as well as others, think one is. Read that again. The persona isn't fake in a shallow way. It's functional. It's the version of you that knows how to operate in public. And that's where the problem starts. Most confidence advice doesn't help you understand your persona. It tells you to inflate it. Be louder. Be bolder. Be more decisive. So you build a stronger mask instead of a stronger connection to yourself. And at first it works. People respond. You get nods. You feel a temporary boost. But internally, something feels hollow. Because the persona was never meant to carry your entire sense of self. It was meant to be a bridge, not a replacement. Jung warned about this exact imbalance. When the mask becomes too important, the inner voice gets ignored. That's when confidence starts feeling performative. You're no longer asking, what do I actually think? You're asking, what would a confident person say here? And those two answers are rarely the same. This is why fake confidence feels unstable. You're managing impressions instead of expressing conviction. You're monitoring reactions instead of standing in clarity. You're maintaining confidence instead of inhabiting it. And the more effort it takes to hold the mask in place, the more disconnected you feel once the moment is over. Here's the key insight most people miss. The discomfort you feel isn't because you used a mask. Everyone does. It's because the mask you used wasn't built from you. Jung put it simply. The shoe that fits one person pinches another. When confidence advice isn't tailored to your internal structure, it doesn't empower you. It exhausts you. And that's the moment where most people either double down or quietly decide confidence just isn't for them. But neither of those is the real solution. Because the issue isn't confidence itself. It's whose version of confidence you've been trying to wear. Once you realize you've been wearing a mask, another question shows up. Why does almost all confidence advice sound the same? And why does following it make you feel worse instead of stronger? Because if confidence were just a checklist, you wouldn't keep running into this internal resistance. The real issue isn't effort. It's direction. So why confidence advice backfires? Most confidence advice focuses on what people can see. Stand taller. Speak clearly. Hold eye contact. Don't hesitate. On the surface, it looks practical. But underneath, it skips the most important part, where that behavior is coming from. So you start copying external signals of confidence without internal agreement. You're not aligning, you're overriding, and your system knows the difference. You end up spending more energy monitoring yourself than engaging with the moment. You're thinking about posture instead of the point you're making. You're adjusting tone instead of responding naturally. That's not confidence. That's control. Carl Jung warned about this kind of mismatch long before confidence became a self-improvement industry. He put it this way: the shoe that fits one person pinches another. Most advice assumes there's one correct way to look confident. But confidence isn't universal. It's personal. When you borrow someone else's style, you borrow their structure too. And if it doesn't match yours, it creates friction. That friction shows up as tension, as hesitation, as that familiar sense of acting instead of being. And here's the trap. When it doesn't work, you don't question the advice. You question yourself. You assume you're doing it wrong. So you try harder. You exaggerate the behavior. You double down, which only increases the disconnect. That's why fake confidence feels fragile. It requires constant maintenance. The moment your attention slips, it collapses. Real confidence doesn't need supervision. It doesn't ask, "Am I coming across confident right now?" It's too busy being engaged. The irony is, confidence advice fails most often on people who are already self-aware, because awareness turns every borrowed behavior into a performance. So if confidence has ever felt draining, if you've ever walked away from a situation feeling more disconnected than empowered, that wasn't a personal flaw. That was your internal structure rejecting a strategy that wasn't built for it. And once you understand that, the goal stops being more confidence. It becomes the right kind of confidence. So when confidence advice backfires, it doesn't just fail. It creates friction inside you, not loud conflict, not panic, a quiet split. And once that split starts, everything feels harder than it should. The inner split. You feel. The strange thing is, most people can't see it. From the outside, you look fine, capable, put together. But inside, two versions of you are active at the same time. One is doing the talking. The other is watching. The talking part is focused on delivery, how you're coming across, whether you sound certain enough. The watching part is relentless. It tracks every adjustment you make, every moment you hesitate, every time you lean into a version of yourself that doesn't feel fully yours. That's the split. You're present, but not fully inhabiting yourself. And the more self-aware you are, the sharper this division becomes. You start noticing things you never used to notice. The way your voice changes mid-sentence. The way your body stiffens when you try to project certainty. The way you mentally step back to evaluate yourself while you're still speaking. This is where confidence starts to feel exhausting, because half your attention is no longer on the moment. It's on managing the version of you that's being seen. Carl Jung described this internal tension clearly. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That line isn't dramatic, it's precise. Because what you're really resisting isn't the situation in front of you. It's the discomfort of letting your unpolished self be visible. So instead, you regulate, you edit, you control. And control feels safer than exposure, but it comes at a cost. The more you control, the less grounded you feel afterward. You walk away replaying the interaction, not because something went wrong, but because something felt divided. You weren't rejected by others, you were split from yourself. That's why the fake feeling lingers even when things go well, even when people respond positively, even when nothing objectively bad happens. Because confidence that requires self-monitoring creates distance, and distance creates doubt. The real problem isn't that you're unsure of yourself. It's that you're trying to be two people at once. And no amount of confidence techniques can resolve that split. Only integration can. Once you notice that split, the one part performing and the other part watching, a different question starts to matter. Not how to look confident, but how to stop feeling divided. Because real confidence doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from settling into one place instead of two. And now we get to the important question, which is, what is real confidence actually? Real confidence is quieter than you expect. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need warm-up rituals. It doesn't ask for permission to exist. You've felt it before, just not in the moments you were trying. Real confidence shows up when you stop managing yourself. when you speak without adjusting your tone halfway through, when you hold a pause without rushing to fill it, when you respond instead of rehearsing. Notice how different that feels. There's no internal commentary running in the background, no checking your posture, no wondering how you're being perceived. Your attention isn't split, it's directed. Carl Jung pointed to this state when he said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That choice isn't about becoming louder or bolder, it's about choosing not to abandon your natural way of operating. Real confidence doesn't come from asserting yourself more. It comes from withholding less editing, less suppression, less performance. That's why it feels stable. It doesn't spike and crash. It doesn't disappear when someone challenges you. It doesn't require you to maintain an image, because it isn't built on an image. Real confidence feels grounded because it's aligned with how you actually process, think, and respond. You're not trying to convince anyone. You're not protecting yourself from being seen. You're not proving anything. You're simply present. And presence has weight. This is why people often describe truly confident individuals as calm rather than intense, clear rather than forceful, direct without being rigid. They're not holding themselves together. They're not fighting themselves. There's no inner negotiation happening in real time. And once you experience that, the difference is obvious. Fake confidence feels loud but fragile. Real confidence feels quiet but solid. One is effort, the other is ownership. And the moment you stop chasing how confidence should look, you create space for the version that doesn't need to be maintained at all. Once you understand what real confidence feels like, something important clicks. You stop asking how to add confidence and start noticing what's been blocking it. Because confidence was never missing. It was being overridden. The shift happens when you stop treating confidence as a performance problem and start treating it as a relationship with yourself. Up until now, the question has always been, how do I come across? That question keeps you divided. The moment everything changes is when you replace it with a different one. Which part of me is uncomfortable being here right now? That question doesn't demand control. It invites awareness. Instead of forcing yourself to speak up, you notice what makes you hesitate. Instead of pushing confidence into your voice, you notice what tightens when attention is on you. This is where integration begins. Carl Jung captured this idea clearly when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In practical terms, that means this: when a part of you resists showing up, it's not sabotaging you, it's carrying information. And when you stop fighting that resistance, something surprising happens. The tension drops, not because you became bolder, but because you stopped splitting yourself in two. Confidence doesn't arrive as a surge. It settles in as a steadiness. You're no longer dragging parts of yourself forward against their will. You're moving with them. That's why this shift feels different from motivation or hype. There's no rush, no artificial energy, no aftermath of self-criticism once the moment passes. You leave interactions feeling intact instead of depleted. And over time, this creates a new baseline. You start trusting your natural timing, your natural tone, your natural way of holding space. Not because you lowered standards, but because you stopped measuring yourself against a version that was never yours. This is the moment. Confidence stops being something you activate and starts being something you inhabit. It doesn't require effort, it requires honesty. And once you make that shift, confidence doesn't feel fake anymore. It feels familiar. Like coming back to a place you forgot you already knew how to stand in. After the shift, there's one final step most people miss. It's not enough to feel aligned inside. You also have to live it in the world without performing. Because confidence only becomes real when it's expressed, not just felt. After the shift, there's one final step most people miss. It's not enough to feel aligned inside. You also have to live it in the world without performing. Because confidence only becomes real when it's expressed, not just felt. Owning your confidence without force is about dropping the pretense entirely. You don't try to act bold. You don't try to sound certain. You don't pace, rehearse, or monitor yourself for approval. Instead, you notice what naturally rises from inside, and you let it guide your action. It's subtle, almost invisible. For example, in a conversation, instead of over-explaining to prove your point, you pause and speak only what feels true. Instead of trying to assert yourself in a meeting, you notice where your contribution adds value and step in. Instead of amplifying your presence, you notice what posture or energy feels aligned, then move with that. That's the real difference. Alignment versus amplification. Alignment doesn't exhaust you. It doesn't create internal splits. It doesn't leave you replaying moments afterward. And here's the kicker. Other people notice it, without you trying to impress them. Carl Jung described something similar when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That means the more you accept and integrate the parts of yourself you've been ignoring, the more natural your confidence becomes. The fake feeling disappears because there's no mask left to wear. You're not copying someone else's posture, tone, or rhythm. You're simply inhabiting the version of yourself that has always existed, the one who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. That's why this stage is crucial before the closing. It's the moment you understand that confidence isn't built. It's reclaimed. It's not something external you have to manufacture. It's an internal state you stop obstructing. And once you reach it, you start moving through the world without friction. Your energy stays steady. Your presence feels natural. And, most importantly, the fake feeling never comes back. By now, you've seen how masks, splits and tortutosts and misaligned advice make confidence feel fake. But here's the twist most people miss. That fake feeling wasn't a problem. It was a signal. A guide pointing to exactly where your confidence is being blocked. Think back to the last time confidence felt forced. You were standing taller, speaking louder, acting bold. But in Thomas, something nagged at you. That unease, that awkward tension, it was your system saying, "This isn't yours. Stop trying to wear someone else's version of confidence." Most people ignore this signal. They think, "I just need more practice. I need to try harder." So they push, they perform, they force. And it never works. Jung would have recognized this pattern instantly. He said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The unconscious here isn't some mystical thing. It's the part of you that knows which behaviors, tones, and rhythms belong to you, and which are borrowed. That part of you was whispering, nudging, signaling, "You're not aligned. You're abandoning yourself. You're performing." And when you ignore that signal, confidence collapses. But when you listen to it, something powerful happens. You start identifying the parts of yourself that have been hidden or rejected. You notice the hesitation, the tension, the inner split. And instead of fighting it, you integrate it. Suddenly, confidence stops being about how you look. It becomes about how you inhabit yourself. The fake feeling disappears because you're no longer wearing a mask. You're not performing. You're not measuring yourself against someone else's image of boldness. You're simply being present.